make sure the client knows that you were very thoughtful with every little decision you made in that design. Now, even if they don't like it, you have the reason behind it and you can defend it. And that's, at the end of the day, that's your job. If they want you to go back to whatever wasn't working, well, it's their money.
This is On Camera, On Brand, a show for professionals who want to look good on camera, but don't have the time or expertise to turn their office into a Hollywood studio. In each episode, Rob Ruscher uncovers how professionals can get the most from their home or office setups. If you invest the time to share your stories on camera, you should be on brand.
Today, we're talking actually about design, and welcome to the show. I'm joined by my good friend, Chris Jurchak. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Chris is someone I've worked with for, I think we were trying to talk about this yesterday, 12 years, I think we've been working on video projects together.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah, we worked full-time for a while, and why I brought Chris on is because his unique eye, I guess is a good way to put it, and the way you can always see colors in the design, whether it's coloring videos, and then also what I think is one of your specialties is like your layout designs, websites, and knowing what works and not. So before we jump into more stuff, do you want to just give us a quick little beats, like how did you start getting into art? Was there anything that happened where you're like, I want to be a graphic designer? Did you go to school for it? Give us that little couple-minute rundown.
Yeah, I mean, it's like just growing up, I think like any kid, you realize, you just like to draw. And I guess I took it on as maybe more than other kids because I think my parents noticed it in me more that I love drawing. I was a very visual kid. And so they took the first step for me and they actually enrolled me into private art lessons.
So how old was that? Not to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was in around fourth grade.
Okay.
So pretty young. And they enrolled me in private art lessons. And it was just like this old lady from England that gave art lessons for like $10 a lesson. But she was an amazing teacher, and she brought what the passion was in me out and into a more technical type of ability. And so she was kind of training me in these classically with like oil paints, water paints, pastels, charcoal. And so I got this amazing training at a very young age. And, you go to the elementary school and I would just blow everyone else away. At fourth grade. So it was kind of a good feeling to
just dominate an elementary school art class.
Yeah, just have this talent that just came to the surface immediately and I was like excelling at. So that was good because I excelled at nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also seems like you were able to kind of find a passion and have an educator help, almost develop a passion.
Yeah, exactly. That was
design.
Such a key thing that when, you have it, it's in there somewhere. And for someone to kind of draw it out, pun intended, it just wasn't a great feeling to see that kind of come to life and be able to see it come on the page and you're able to draw the things that you're seeing. And so it was great.
Okay. So like fourth grade, we're drawing, we're getting almost this classical training with art and oil paintings. And then, tell me like high school, I think you ended up seeing an agency in real life. You worked at a yearbook and did stuff too.
Yeah. Anything I could do to get my hands on in terms of design or art. So I would join the yearbook class or, try to take higher level art classes to try to keep feeding that type of passion. But I was able to, at the time, I had a brother that lived in New York and his girlfriend was a art director at a ad agency. And so I got to go to Brooklyn and go to an ad agency and see what it looked like in kind of in the real world experience. So I got to see it firsthand and I was blown away that, wow, you get to kind of be creative all day. And that just never kind of occurred to me that was an option or a career path at the time. So I knew then I wanted to go into the field of graphic design.
And was there a moment where I know you draw and you probably still have those skills, but was there a moment where it turned more into graphic design versus like painting or just drawing?
Yeah. My parents did not want me to become a starving artist. And so they were very adamant that I find a way to take this creative ability, this artistic passion, and make sure I can make money from it. And so at the time, it wasn't very popular, but they kind of put me in the direction of graphic design because that was a field that was expanding and getting bigger. And even in context here, this was like the late 90s. This is when Photoshop first kind of was on the scene, and I got to start to play with it a little bit and understand how to kind of take those drawing skills, painting skills, and put them onto a computer. So
Yeah. And then it seemed, I mean, it's nice you did that early, because I even think of in a similar way. In high school, I did film photography. By the time I got to college, it was all digital.
Yeah.
There's no film class. Like,
Yeah.
it was all digital. It was all on computer. And when I took a photography class in college too, same thing. I think my freshman year was the last year they offered a film course, like film photography, and then everything else was Photoshop and the digital.
Yeah, it
digital
changed
stuff.
very quickly. Yeah, yeah.
So when did you start college then? Was that 2002?
No, it was spring of 2001 in DC. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah, just for context, because at that point, were you like, this is what I want to do, like going, because you went to graphic design school?
I went to a small college, a university, Marymount University, and I majored in graphic design. So I knew what my major was immediately. I knew the direction I was going in.
And so, and I guess we'll just jump. I mean, tell me, did I miss anything else? I know, you majored in film school. And then I guess post-college, your first work stuff, you were actually working in ad agency. So you were getting training at a pretty stressful, intense level.
So right out of college, I got a job within the first couple months at a recruitment ad agency in Tysons Corner, Virginia. And when you first go into an ad agency, it's not, you think you're going to get this office and you're going to be this art director. No, you start in a studio. You are there to kind of QC all the ads and all the things that are getting ready for print. So you are just in kind of a little bit of an area where you're just kind of being, going through the fire. But at the same time, it's a great thing because you're understanding how all these ads are being put together. And at that time, print was still pretty heavy. So we were getting everything ready for print, making sure it was formatted right and everything was kind of in order so that it could go to print.
And I know, and looking now, it's, you're not really doing much print in terms of I know you said, which I think is really interesting, you would physically layer items, to make your designs, right? So how does that translate? Do you find you're grateful you had that kind of exposure to design versus just jump into Photoshop day one?
Yeah, I really did appreciate that. And it's funny, I think a lot of that's being lost because everyone is kind of in this digital age and it happens and you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. You understand how it works. But I was fortunate enough to understand some of the tools that were needed to be able to print and why things are called what they are and masks and die cuts and things. And so it was a great foundation. Yeah.
And why do you think that's important to know? And I'm just even thinking for the people listening, maybe someone, they're an intern, they just jumped in, they've watched 1 million hours of YouTube, they know everything they need to know. But what are they missing or what could they add on? Because, and even if you want a little hint, talking about the color wheel, which we talked, I feel when you learn these core principles that have been here since the dawn of time, there's a reason for it and the reason they work.
Yeah, there's that's the thing. There's especially in good design, there's always a reason behind design choices, not just you like it or it looks good. Good design is informed by good, solid, critical thinking. And so when you have the understanding of why something works or how things work together or in pairs or in patterns, you can create a better design and then have the great foundation of being able to communicate why it's good design. And that's very important. So yes, take all the tutorials you want, but I think you got to start to understand a little more just the depths of it, the history of it, and make sure that you are well informed so that you can, present your designs in a well-informed way.
Yeah, and a great example of this is just something we experienced this trip where Chris and I are both, if you're watching it, you can see I'm not in my office. I'm actually at New North working with them on a lot of stuff. So we had a cool opportunity to sit down and chat. But I love the fact that we were filming here and Tristan says, here are the colors we want to use. What wardrobe should our talent wear? And you just by looking at that was oh, it should be this color, that color. And do you want to just explain that real quickly, how that works? I think that's a really interesting and something that people maybe starting in design or maybe they're like me, a video background, but now with their company, they need to do more graphics. I think that's a really interesting and cool hack almost.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've been doing it so many years. It is kind of second nature, so it does help you kind of, move the process along, But basically, there's a certain brand that we were filming for, and just by showing me the color palette, I knew it was an analogous color palette, and analogous color palette is just kind of colors next to each other on the color wheel. And so from there, I'm easily to go into, to the talent and look at the wardrobe and be like, yes, we're going to wear this shirt with these pants and this blazer because that's going to be what's on brand. And that's going to always kind of tell the user, even though it's subconscious, that I'm watching something that is geared towards this brand. And so even though you don't know that people might not understand what they're seeing there's a reason behind it, and it will kind of subconsciously click for the viewer.
Yeah, and I think it's also having what you just said, you hit on something of like having the reasons why, like not just, I think this looks cool, right? Or, well, this is blue, I want to do green next to it because it looks good. It's like it's one thing just to make your own designs, and that's great. And it's not saying anyone's designs are better or worse than others, but I think you and I can both agree that there's a difference between doing it for me and my company and then doing it for another company that's paying you thousands of dollars and expecting. You can't just say, oh, I did this because purple and black look good together, right? It's like you have to have like a almost technical knowledge and thesaurus of like art terms in like a way. I guess it just comes down to communicating.
That's the thing. Like we were saying, you have to be kind of well informed to be able to kind of defend your design. So yeah, Rob, so when you get into those rooms with those like people in the corporations and you have to present a design, you need to be able to have the ability to defend the work and have the reasons why you made those design choices. If you don't have those, it'll fall apart so quickly and you'll get booted out of those rooms.
Well, what does that look like for someone? I mean, I've been in pitch meetings for videos, but if you're, and you can use whatever example fits best, whether it's web design or just like a graphics package, but what does a meeting like that look like? And what are some of these questions you're getting asked or pushback that you need to defend or almost just not even defend, but to support? Like I did this because.
Yeah. I mean, before the pandemic, you would actually physically go into a room. I've done a lot of presentations now kind of on Zoom, which, at the same time, it's kind of the same animal, but basically what you want to do is you set up your work. You don't show them, I don't show it to them immediately. You kind of set it up. You tell them what you heard from them, what you were trying to solve. We heard this. Then you present the work. You systematically break down the design of every little choice you made, why you made it, and how it kind of goes with the design issues or problems that they originally had. And so when you start to show them that, hey, you felt like you needed to be more approachable brand. Well, we decided that we would start to make these design elements more curved. We'll make your, calls to actions and the buttons more rounded. And this will give the viewer the ability to feel a little more like you're a little more approachable. Like I can click on these things. So you create these, like you make sure the client knows that you were very thoughtful with every little decision you made in that design. Now, even if they don't like it, you have the reason behind it and you can defend it. And that's at the end of the day, that's your job. If they want you to go back to whatever wasn't working, well, it's their money.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is like, there's something to this. I won't stay on this topic too long, but I think there's something really valuable here with learning how to communicate as a designer. And what I mean by that is what you just said, how you explained, you're going to dissect it and tell me. And let's say it's me and I say, Chris, this is what I'm thinking for a new website. Even if I don't like what you did or it wasn't what I was thinking, if you're able to explain that to me, I just feel like it doesn't go, I don't just say, I don't like it. Because you gave me so much, I have to say, Chris, you're right. And I see what you're saying. But I feel like as a client, it almost makes my job easier. I have less to argue with or less to, and we're all creative. Even the clients, these agency owners, they're intelligent, great people. They have this vision. But if I have someone that can speak to me in that way, I think it's just a more positive and probably a better working relationship.
Well, here's what I'll do then. If I go through that and I dissect everything I've done and someone says, I don't like it, I turn it on them. Why don't you like it? Tell me what you're seeing that you don't like. So it's almost like I want you to explain your decisions, your reasonings be why you don't like it. Because then we, like you said, we can get into more of a visual vocabulary that we can start to communicate a little better. Sometimes things get lost in translation. I'm from the design world. Some people are from, the business world. And sometimes there is that language that gets lost. So when people just say, I don't like it, I need more of an explanation. I need you to drill down into the things that you don't like. What isn't working for you? Then we can start to have solutions. We can create solutions when we understand what's going on. And that's why it's important to, again, be well informed and to have that ability to kind of go to the core of things and understand them so we can kind of build on top of that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that popped in my head that's relevant is when I was coming up filming, I sometimes would push back on being too technical and learning things because for some reason it'll get in the way of my creativity. You know, it's like, oh God, who was I 10 years ago? But like now it's just like, not only was that not accurate at all, I became so much faster when I really dug in and like really went back to film basics and all this stuff. It's just like you're saying in a different way, you communicate better on set with people. You have this like a reasoning, not just it looks good.
Yeah.
And then especially with design, I'm assuming a lot of these projects, they're not always one-off. So like if you have this really great foundation you've built with the client, I'd have to imagine that the rest of it's a little easier moving on. Like not that there won't be hiccups, but it's like you guys have this language now. They know, hey, Chris is going to work with us. He has a reason behind everything. I just feel like at some point, okay, I'm way too busy. Chris has got it, right? Do you find that sometimes where like after maybe one or two projects from there on out, the client's just like, just.
Oh yeah. I mean, once you get to kind of get to know the client, understand their pain points and how their processes work, it's almost like you do become a part of their team in a sense once you kind of get in there. And so even when you jump on a meeting with them, everyone's like happy to see each other. And, you're going to obviously there'll always be some kind of hurdle to get across. But yeah, once you're kind of in with the client and they see how kind of dedicated you are or how kind of detail oriented you are in terms of caring for their brand, relationships do tend to get easier and better, and we're all there to kind of solve the same problem.
I always say if you speak and present yourself like a professional, most of the time people are going to treat you that way.
Yeah.
And so I think having that technical knowledge is so huge. And again, it's funny because there's so much great information out there online. I mean, I'm part of the people that are putting out content so people can learn, but you still somehow have to learn those like basic knowledge.
I think also, so you said, you speak like a professional, you treat it like a professional, but I think you also at the same time, if you speak with passion, if you speak as if everything you've done on this project has been a joy, and it's not always, I get it, projects can be hard, but like everything you've done, you put your all into it. People do respect that, and they really give you, they kind of appreciate the kind of the effort you put into it. So speak professionally but passionately.
And obviously design is everything from stationery to websites to flyers, social media ads. I'm curious to know, do you have a standard process for when you get a project? Is there do you start with something? Do you have like places you go for inspiration to start? Is it simply you're just reading the deck or your notes and you just start going? Like what's almost the first stroke?
It kind of depends on the project. I do video work, like you said, web design, print design, logo design. So it just depends on the project. But what helps on any project is talking to the client and almost getting keywords or descriptive words from the client. And that's really a good basis. So like a lot of clients are like, we want this to be, inspirational, motivational, approachable. We are very motivated. And so I start writing down these keywords, and they're just words on a page at the time. But once I get into like the next step, that might be a video treatment, that might be what's called kind of a style tile, where we put a lot of like design elements together. Those keywords will follow into those next documents. So when I do turn around and present the first like phase back to the client, those keywords are on the screen. So they can see exactly what they said and know that I was listening and that all the things that they said are informing this new design direction.
Is it hard sometimes, like going off of that? Yes, at the end of the day, we want to make our clients happy, and if they're paying for us and that's what they want, but what do you do when, honestly, you just think it's a bad idea? Or if they're making suggestions that that you just know won't work? Obviously, yes, you can just do it, but is there ways you try to push back, or does that happen much? Or
yeah, and every client is different. I think when I was younger, I would just be like, okay, and I think I would just go with whatever they wanted. I was very much like a pleaser. Yeah, let's just Let's just, okay, you don't like, let's just go in that direction. I think today I do try to push back more. And again, it goes back to that well-informed design. If you have your reasons behind your vision, your
Yeah.
direction, if you can defend it and tell them why this will work, then most of the time, I think people get on board. They do come to you because they had an issue, they had a design issue or a conflict, and they came to you to kind of solve that. So most of the time, I always say trust in the creative. Well, yeah, they trust in the creative to kind of excel a vision. There'll always be times where you'll get pushback and you just kind of have to kind of go with the flow and just do the best you can.
Yeah, it's almost like you try to push back a little bit, but
Yeah.
then at some point, it's not your money, right?
Yeah.
You're not paying for this
No,
project.
there's no
so.
point where I am like just butting heads. It is
Yeah.
purely a kind of a conversation about options and what we could do if we went in this direction. What if we went in this direction? And I try to work my best in any direction we go in.
Yeah, it's kind of almost turning the art industry almost into a little bit of a service business in a way, and just making sure you're.
And that's what
Yeah.
design and video is. It is a service. At the same time, design and video is subjective. So there's no real right answer in terms of what direction you go in. So it can be a little bit of a kind of a complicated issue in terms of when you do go in a direction. But that's why communicating a vision is so important.
And so, speaking of communicating, then, and I already know this answer, but like, how early should the design be thought about on any project if it's going to be? We'll just focus on content. Let's say we're talking to the marketing agencies, people like us that are doing, the content work. Like, at what point do you like to be brought into a video, an event, whatever type of project?
Honestly, the earlier the better. Like if I can understand the pain points or the things happening early on, I think you can kind of meet them head on. And I love understanding the reasoning why. Why are we having this event? Why is this brand changing? If I can understand the reasonings, your reasonings, I can start to see the foundation of where we need to start. So
Yeah.
it's earlier the better for me. I love to hear, even if I'm just listening. If I'm just a fly on the wall listening to these problems being tossed around, that's I'm taking notes and understanding where the problems are coming from.
Yeah, and then it seems like from that, if you have an understanding, even let's say, we'll just use an example. Let's say either I'm hiring you as a freelancer, or you're like an internal designer, and we know next quarter we're doing this big event. We know we want to film and do whatever. So that seems like then is like, hey, Chris, like it's not happening yet, but this is what I'm trying to do, and maybe set up like a call and go through that. And then from there, are you starting to just slowly build out maybe like, oh, this is, the video background could be this, or we could do this as a lower third? Or do you wait until you see the video to start layering in design elements?
No, I really do. I try to do a lot of work in pre-production, and that even maybe includes kind of mocking up a frame or doing a storyboard or trying to show a mood board so that we're all on the same page and that there's an understanding of where we're headed. I've learned early on that like to just go do a video and come back and people see it and like they didn't expect that. It's not a good thing always. So it's like if you can start in pre-production and put together those elements of like the color palette, the visual vocabulary, the mood board, storyboards, everyone will be on board or can at least sign off, and you can continue and move the project forward.
Yeah, and it seems even, I mean, I'm sure it was always important, but on my side, I feel like it's more important now than ever to have a designer early on, just because no longer, hopefully anyone listening to this is not still doing this, but no longer are you shooting one video for one output, right? It's like even this podcast, I know it's going to go on TikTok, Reels, I know
Right.
9x16. So it seems like even more important to have a designer to say, because you don't want to come back from an event or the footage, load it all off, here's all the cuts, and then all of a sudden the designer has 2 days to do 9x16 graphics and framing, and and it's probably not going to look as good as if you had some input or even told me certain things that would work branding wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes like if you can, as a designer or director, I need to understand the whole of the project so that even then you can stay organized. I mean, it's so important to kind of stay organized with all these types of projects and understand scheduling and media output and organize the project so you can kind of make sure you can move the project forward. I mean, I think organization is key to a lot of this stuff.
And where does like an art director come in? I mean, I know sometimes smaller projects or smaller companies, maybe the art director does a bunch of stuff or the one person's doing multiple, but on the bigger scale, just for what is the difference, or why would I want to consider maybe bringing an art director in a project versus just hiring a freelance designer to do graphics?
That's a tough question. I mean, I feel like, freelancers will still give you probably a quality product. I mean, I think, a lot of times, freelancers are art directors. So I don't know if there's a difference. I would just say you would want to bring an art director in because at the end of the day, it'll give you consistency. What designers are trained to do is to create consistency throughout a brand and to create unity. And so what that'll do is kind of make sure that everything flows together and everything, even though subconscious, is all kind of related. And the user will understand that visually.
No, that's, yeah. So it almost seems like what I'm thinking of is if you're debating, if it's a one-off project, a good designer can help you, especially if you bring them early in. But maybe if you have a campaign and like, hey, we're shooting all week, we have different things, we're at this event, maybe having an art director to help format that whole event, especially if you're thinking like, hey, we're going to do like 10, 15, 20 outputs from
That's
this.
true. That's very true. And I think that goes with what I was saying about consistency, but an art director can give you almost like that roadmap, that those guidelines to kind of help everyone kind of stay in the same color palette, stay in the same fonts. And like, not everyone's running around doing everything they want. They create a unity. So yeah, an art director would give you kind of that ability.
And sometimes just having a second set of eyes. I mean, I'm a very visual person, but sometimes when I'm filming, I'm not always looking at like the background colors. I'm looking at lighting. I'm checking audio. I'm checking how the camera's moving and blocking it. There's been several times, you're blocking and someone's like, hey, there's a stand in there. I'm like, wait, oh, sorry. Cause I'm like looking at the corner of this frame to how in my head I'm figuring something out. So sometimes having someone just look at that and even with like props and backgrounds, sometimes it's just nice to if someone else is just focusing on that,
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, yeah, with kind of how we work, you have the technical skill and you're able to kind of get these things up and running and smooth. And I'll look at the frame and I'll look at it as a very visual type of kind of eye. And, I think it blends well together. And I think that's the other thing, to work around people that have abilities that you don't have, create a better product. So it's, surrounding yourself with a team where you can help kind of fill those gaps and fill those holes and kind of, have your talents complement their talents.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. I think I've seen a movement for that in general where people are more into hiring a specialist for this project versus like, and even company wise, seeing companies say, no, we're not doing everything. Like we're going to focus on this niche here and just get really good at it. It seems similar. And even coming up, I feel like maybe I was feeling not as confident because it's like, oh, I can't do that. And then you get to a point, you're like, well, I don't need to be amazing at this because I'll bring Chris on to do that. Now I focus on what I'm good at and what I like to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's collaborating with the people that do the things that you don't.
Totally. Oh yeah, I know. And there is so much, there's so many layers. And I guess even we can be coming to the end. The one thing I want to talk about is just with all that being said, like, how do you feel about these AI tools? And not we don't have to go into the whole AI, but just in general, there's a lot of tools and apps that do things we weren't able to do before faster, sometimes better. Are you worried about a designer? Do you get scared when you see all that? How do you feel about these tools?
At the moment, I feel fine. I think you just said they are tools. They are a paintbrush and they are a tool in your kit. And if you can learn how to use that tool, you probably have nothing to worry about. So I'm kind of excited about it. Some of the things we're going to be able to do and maybe even kind of do even faster and kind of be able to visually communicate like we didn't used to be able to. So I don't have a problem with it. But I think it goes back to a design advice I was given on very early as a designer. Apps, applications, programs will come and go. The elements and principles of design and art will always remain. And that's true. I mean, as long as you can kind of understand those basic principles, you can use any type of tool you want to create what you want to create. So it's okay, Photoshop may not be around one day, who knows? But if you can still understand what makes good design, you can still be an effective designer.
Yeah, that's great. No, that is encouraging. And I think that's so true because even though technologies, you can type in a few things and like put all that. You still need someone to do that, like to type in the prompts and get it there,
Yeah.
and to kind of communicate with that. And I feel like I'm on the same boat. I embrace it. I think it's awesome. I think there's definitely ways people are going to abuse it and not go well, but I just think there's a lot of exciting things to make your life easier. You know, and even like Canva is a great example for me. I know Photoshop, I can do most things, but I'm not like you. You know, I see you in Photoshop, and even when we work together, oh, can you do this? And it's almost like you always did things like 3 or 4 different ways to get to the same, like you just knew that tool.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't need that power. But now with Canva, it's like, ooh, click, remove the back. It almost has those things that you're going to use the most. But again, you still have to do it, and you still have to get that.
Right. And you know what's funny? The skills that I have in Photoshop come from the training I got when I was in 4th grade at those private lessons. The way I shade in Photoshop are still the way I was trained to shade on paper. So it's very informed from a classical type of training. So yeah, Canva might have a button for shading now, you know, but I guess I understood why the shadow was like that, where the light direction was coming from, why you can create something on a 2D space look 3-dimensional, and how is that possible? So maybe it's faster these days. That's great. But
I was almost thinking what you just said probably makes you faster in some ways. Like I think there's tools that are great for their uses, but it doesn't ever. It shouldn't. I mean, I'm trying to think of the right word. It shouldn't eliminate the need for you to learn the fundamentals if you're trying to do design work.
That's right. I think that's exactly right. And it's just, if you go back to the fundamentals, go back to the simple fundamentals, and I think you'll always find a solid foundation.
What kind of projects are you working on these days? What are you finding yourself doing and enjoying working on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. I mean, one day I'll be working on a website. The next day I'll be editing, videos for a lot of like nonprofits in the area. So that's always very kind of fulfilling for me to kind of be doing these kind of inspirational stories of kind of nonprofits and associations.
The last thing I was just going to ask you is if you want to talk, and it should feed in from what you just said, is what are any huge changes you've seen in the design world or anything? I mean, because you kind of said like what's the same, which I think is great, and maybe there's not. So I can just ask, is there a huge design trend change?
Well, I mean, stuff's changing all the time. I mean, there's so many more applications out there now.
Yeah, to do the same job, you mean?
Yeah, like even in the design world, there's XD, like you said, Canva.
Yeah.
There's all these different applications do the same thing. So it just depends on how you want to paint.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, do you do Photoshop for most? I mean, the Adobe Suite.
I don't get to do as much Photoshop as I used to like to, because everything's kind of now like built in these programs where it's very kind of, Photoshop will still be used for photo manipulation. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, I'm not doing a lot of that.
For like your design element. So that's interesting. So when you're doing a website or something, it's actually on the like WordPress or Square, whatever.
No, if I'm doing a web design right now, it's built in XD.
Okay.
And that's very much, you're taking elements and you're designing it into a way that is formed for a website, right? So it's in a sense kind of very blocky.
Okay.
Now, if I needed to manipulate a photo, I would go into Photoshop. But what I do miss is like kind of that movie poster design and stuff where you really do get into Photoshop and really manipulate and really kind of create this like these creative artistic pieces that, have a lot of kind of different elements. But I always have passion projects. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the passion projects are always fun. I feel like you get to dive in that. Well, dude, Chris, I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. And I mean, I've known you for so long, so I'm glad I got to learn a little bit more about the history and the art, how you know everything. Because again, I'll never forget when I started working at 522 when you were there. I just remembered like thinking I knew enough about Photoshop, and then watching you work, and like I'd ask you questions, and you could do it this way. I was like, oh man, this is an art director here. I'm gonna just stay on camera, I think. Where can people see the work you're doing? Are you active on social media? I mean,
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I haven't stayed up to par on social media, but yeah, you can you can see some of my work there. But yeah, definitely need to kind of post some new stuff.
Get on it. No, dude, I love seeing that. Well, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for checking out On Camera, On Brand. This episode is produced by Motion, a podcast agency that helps B2B organizations create their own shows. If you enjoyed what you learned, check out more episodes at motionagency.io/oncameraonbrand.